Hey there, Awesome RC fan. Welcome to TJsRC. I'm glad you're here. Last week, my wife and I took the RC trucks out to do some rock crawling. We had a great time. While we were out though, both the trucks got wet. Orangee especially though tried to go full-on submarine swimming. Didn't work so well for him. He just sank like a rock. That brings up a great topic for this week. What do you do after your truck gets completely submerged? Once you get it on the bench, what should you look for and where do you look for it? So we're going to get into that today, as well as one thing you can do ahead of time to help prevent as much of that moisture corrosion as possible. So stick around because that is all coming up. First thing you got to do is take the cover off and get all the tires off. I will say though, when you're taking stuff apart, make sure you've got a nice handy place to stick the pieces. This is just a peanut butter jar lid, a couple pieces of plastic, and a giant magnet off of an old CB radio mount. It's nice to have a place to put things when you're tearing things down so that you don't lose any of your parts. Alright, now that we got the wheels off, we're just going to inspect the bearings on each of the four corners where the wheels mount as our first place to check. So we're going to pull off the hub adapters. Be sure you don't lose the little pins. After you pull the hubs and drive pins out, you can get a good look in there and see that those bearings actually look pretty good. Take a look at the front. The bearing looks pretty good. Those look good too. You're basically looking for every point where water, corrosion, rust can cause damage. After a good visual inspection of all the different points where water could do something, I see that there really isn't much that I have to do today. Since it wasn't submerged for very long, I don't feel that it's necessary to tear the axles completely apart to see what's inside. When I rebuilt these axles, I made sure that there was a good amount of real thick silicone grease in the ends, all the places where water could get in. Today we're mostly looking at areas where surface corrosion can cause problems. After a good visual inspection, you want to make sure to take note of any areas where you've got corrosion and clean that really good before moving on. Now, I didn't find any rust this time, mostly because I feel like I did a good job before the truck got wet to make sure all the important pieces were coated appropriately. One thing I did find though is I have a couple of shocks that are leaking an excessive amount of shock oil, so we'll probably do a future video of replacing the shocks on here. This entire area here is coated in oil, which most likely came from inside the shock. But for now, that's actually the only thing I noticed. Now that we're going to take a look at the electronics, a lot of the trail trucks and crawler trucks today advertise as being waterproof, so things like the receiver, the ESC, you really don't have to worry too much about. I'm running the Traxxas XL5 ESC right now. It's originally the one that came with the Bronco, and that one is waterproof. I'm not worried about this at all. Most brushed motors really are okay with water. The only time that you're going to have to really worry is if it's muddy water. It's got sand in it, and it's like taking sandpaper to electronic components. They're not going to last very long. So we've checked every bolt head and every nut, all the visible moving parts, and everything looks pretty good. Nothing has any rust started on it. Before we reassemble it though, let me go over a tip to help prevent corrosion on all of the exposed metal parts that would normally be susceptible to rust. And that is to use something like this, a dry film lubricant. It sprays on wet, but then it dries into a dry film that is not easily washed off. Water washing over the parts that you spray it on isn't going to wear it off. The only places that I tend to have to reapply this stuff when I put it on is areas like the bottom of the knuckles here. These screws are constantly rubbing against debris. These screws on the front of the axle here, they're constantly rubbing against debris and rocks and things, so those areas have to to reapply it to. And I have had really good luck with this stuff. This can is probably going to last me forever, considering you only put on a tiny drop at a time. And I do have a few spots that I'm going to reapply it before I assemble, so we'll show you that. Because it's a giant spray can and you're putting one drop on at a time, you got to be real careful as you're applying it, because otherwise it gets everywhere and it doesn't come off very well. Just a drop. Using the dry film lubricant to protect the parts against rust is working just fine, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper than buying an entire set of stainless steel hardware for these guys. It's a great way to help combat what moisture is trying to do to all the steel parts. Let's put Orangee back together. After your truck's been submerged, you don't want to overlook the motor. Now, Orangee didn't spend a lot of time in the water, so I wasn't too worried about the motor. But if you do spend a bunch of time in the water, make sure you take some electrical contact cleaner and run through the brush area on the back of the motor here. Just kind of spray that good and then sit and spin the motor for a while to get that all worked in there good. And then put a light drop of oil on the bushing. Run that good. Wasn't too worried about Orangee though. He was only in the water for a brief period of time, so I didn't bother taking the motor out completely. I did run some contact cleaner through the brush area. You're basically just being smart and thinking, where can water attack and cause corrosion? And then if you do plan on getting your truck wet, just make sure everything with the potential for corrosion is covered well and protected and well lubricated. Mostly I just wanted to inspire you to pay attention to your truck. You know, look for areas that could be compromised by whatever elements you're in. The more effort you put into taking care of your truck, keeping it running, keeping it going, the longer you're gonna have it, the more fun you're gonna get out of it. If you missed out on last week's adventure, I'll put a link here. If this is your first time here and you haven't clicked away yet, even though I'm rambling on, I appreciate that. Consider subscribing, because the RC hobby's awesome. We love sharing it with you guys. You have a great day. Thanks for watching today. You guys are awesome. We'll see you next time.